Ladies and gentlemen, the civil unrest that's broken out across the United States is truly compelling. It's difficult, after all, to take your eye off of flashbangs and smoke bombs and fires burning on the White House lawn. I mean, this is out of control stuff. But it is critical that we maintain a sense of perspective here around the fact that the same people that are engineering these protests, these violent uprisings, are also working with a longer game plan to engineer food shortages. And those are on the horizon. And while there are some effects from the civil unrest itself on our already overburdened and dysfunctional supply chain, like the fact that truckers are now being forced to shut down at night due to the highways being shut down by protesters and truckers themselves being attacked and dragged out of their cabs, it's ugly out there. So this is actually going to aggravate even further the already overburdened supply chain and give credence to the idea that FEMA had floated in the early days of the coronavirus crisis when they said, we're going to need to give armed escorts to any of these food delivery trucks. Now we're starting to see why some of this language has been so extreme throughout the outbreak. Yeah, now it comes to maturity. But again, the same forces that are working on these uprisings, that are trying to take down in their purple revolution, their cover revolution, the United States from within, are working actively. As I described in this engineering a food shortage video, where I said it's not just meat shortages, ladies and gentlemen. They're going, if you will, whole hog against the entirety of agriculture and our food system. And tonight I want to bring to you briefly, and I covered all of this in depth in a live stream on dlive.tv/iceagefarmer. But tonight I just want to make a brief summary of those things to try and drive this point home as effectively as possible. Please take a look at this article from Bloomberg. Every single worker has COVID at a farm on Harvest Eve. From the article, quote, one farm in Tennessee distributed COVID tests to all of its workers after one employee came down with the virus. It turned out that every single one of the 200 employees had been infected. And in fact, in New Jersey, we had 50 workers at a farm. There were 60 of them in another county. Washington, Yakima County, with apples and pears, they have a ton of infections across. So obviously this is plaguing all of agriculture. They really want to make the case that the farms are being hit just as hard as meat packers. In fact, they put that out there directly. Quote, the early outbreaks at farms, ladies and gentlemen, are already starting to draw comparisons to the infections that plunged the meat industry into crisis over the past few months. There it is. It's the same thing. Experts are warning that thousands of farm workers are vulnerable to contracting the disease. I just am obliged to pause here and just rant briefly. I cannot believe this. I can't believe that you can go to Walmart and Home Depot and Target right now and stand in line and buy trash. But farm workers are being said, you can't harvest food. Do you see how ridiculous the situation is? Do you see how blatant the whole lie is on its face? Allow me to continue. Aside from the immediate concern about the farm workers, which is the whole reason that we're going to be asking for harvest not to come out of this is the whole pretense for shutting down farms. Aside from that immediate concern, this could create labor shortages at the worst possible time, harvest season. Produce crops, such as berries, have a short lifespan. There's only a few weeks to harvest them, and if it doesn't happen, the fruit will rot. Everything ends. If there's a spike in virus cases, we may have shortages of fruits and vegetables, along, of course, with higher prices. Quote, we're watching very, very nervously. The harvest season is starting now. I don't think we're ready. I don't think we're prepared. According to yada yada. Unlike these grain crops, America's fruits and vegetables are mostly picked and packed by hand in long shifts. And it's done by a workforce of seasonal migrants traveling across the nation, and they stay in accommodations on these farms. And so if all of a sudden the CDC and OSHA are issuing guidance, as they are, here's the guidance. Let me just put this out there. I'll pause briefly. Check out the guidance. It's pretty clear what the goal is and what's happening. This is the bad situation when you have meat coming off of your plant. Here's the good situation. Yeah, not as much meat. Here's a different alternative. Yeah, still not as much meat. Bad, you can feed the nation. Good, America's food production is shut down. Thank you, CDC.gov, right here, for making this abundantly clear. I could do no better myself. Here is the guidance that tells you. It's because it says no worker can be here. This is the allowed mode of operations for meatpacking plants, and now we're reading for farms. There will not be enough labor to do the harvest. We're looking at a fraction of our yields across everything, as we just read. And this is going to obviously further exacerbate the losses that we've been seeing in the bad growing seasons lately. I'll return to this article. Without these people, it is nearly impossible to keep the produce aisles stocked. This is a precarious situation. If something happens and it flows through a greenhouse, you can't pick your crop. We're taking precautions, but all you can do is hope for the best. Even before this, because people were afraid to go out, we didn't have enough harvest labor. So even if there isn't a pandemic 2 coming up in this new line of propaganda, but it's already started, I'll show you here shortly, then we're looking at food shortages in the very near future. Again, here's the guidance from the CDC. Less meat, good. Less food coming out of the system, by design. Again, I don't think I can put it any more effectively than they just drew it for us right there. From meats and vegetables, from meat now to fruits and vegetables, the fight to prevent food shortages moves on. This is from Food Safety News. Quote, the federal government this week signaled its willingness to take over any part of the food industry that isn't functioning properly, to keep production flowing. Although Trump's XO 13917 was drafted in a way where all of the language in this EO spoke about the meatpacking plants and worker safety, but we need meat. It concluded with the last little bit that said Secretary of Agriculture Sonny Perdue, head of the USDA, has full license to take over whatever part of food he needs to. So it talked about meat, but then it said, do what you gotta do, Sonny. And he is. He's going to impose these same CDC and OSHA requirements on farms and producers, and they are teeing up for a war against local and state governments that don't want this to happen. And I do mean a war. This is another in a series of proactive, by the way, this latest piece of news is from a memorandum of understanding that was issued jointly by the USDA and FDA, saying that under this executive order, they are now combining their oversight forces together. So it's not just meat, it's vegetables and plant fruits and everything from farms, right? Everything that the FDA covers as well. Due to our unprecedented disruptions during this pandemic, food supply chains are going to have to recover for a long time. This is part of our important preparedness, and while we hope we don't have to use it, this is a Trump, interesting word, a Trump card to be used, as I said, if state or local closures threaten to dispute the harvest, or if the continued functioning of the national food supply chain is at risk, undermining critical infrastructure. Inslee in Washington has already shown his hand. He's already indicated that he's on the side, I've covered this before, of the unions, United Farm Workers, and several others, as well as the media, who's trying to talk about this. Again, you can go to Walmart, no problem, but no, you can't harvest the crops. You can't keep your country fed. It's so patently ridiculous on its face that I have trouble doing it justice, because I want to talk about the details and how they're accomplishing it, but it's ridiculous on its face. And I just need you to share this video so that people understand what's going on, so that we can start growing food ourselves and start getting prepared. And I should just end it there. We'll just end it there. Because we've talked before about Inslee and how he sided with the unions and said, we're not going to even harvest, the state's fruit harvest will be left to rot, due to Inslee saying, yeah, it's not safe for those farm workers. And we don't need food, after all. We want that problem. He's engineering a food shortage. And it's for that reason that farmers are already expressing their concern. From this article, specialty crop growers start the season with labor shortage concerns. Quote, crop growers are concerned about the lingering market and labor impacts of the pandemic, and it's going to have an outsized impact on this growing season and on seasons to come. Because you read that people who have orchards have already, here, look, Sean Gilbert, a Washington fruit grower, said, I've already had to rip up 8% of my orchards because I didn't have the labor I needed just to keep them running. Just to keep those trees trimmed and fed and whatever goes on in an apple orchard. I didn't have the labor, so I had to rip it out of the ground. I had to kill this production permanently. That's why I'm emphasizing this is not just now. This is for seasons to come. And this damage has already happened. This isn't a look out in case they... No, we can talk, you want to speculate, we can talk about the fact that the Nuclear Energy Regulatory Commission has already warned that COVID could cause grid down. We can talk about the fact that Municipal governments have already talked about the CO2 shortage due to the fact that the ethanol plants and how there's going to be water shortages in the municipal water supply, and they'll have to use water rationing in the cities. But that hasn't happened yet. Those are real. Those are real risks, but it hasn't materialized yet. Those are just threats from the establishment, rubbing in your face how much you depend on them if you live in these cities. But this stuff, the damage to the food supply system and to our supply chain, has already happened. And as I said, it is just so patently, blatantly obvious on its face that it's the same forces engineering these problems. Take a look at this brand new website that appeared out of nowhere called workingattyson.com, which is a well-published little piece of information here. Well, let's take a look at it. What's it like to work for Tyson during COVID-19? You have to stand shoulder to shoulder, hours on end. You have limited bathroom breaks. Even without a pandemic, it sounds brutal, but now it's gotten worse, and we fear for our livelihoods and our lives. Oh, these people are trapped in there, shoulder to shoulder. They're afraid for their lives. It's pretty clear what case this piece of propaganda is pushing. They want you to side with the workers and with worker safety. And of course, they're not going to talk about how much we need the food, how much we need the meat coming out of these plants, and how if we have no crop harvests and no meat, then we starve as a nation. I mean, it's just absolutely insane. But no, we're going to focus on how employees didn't get their sick coverage billed, and look at all these working conditions. Who, let's skip to the meat of this because it's a bunch of nonsense. But who put this website up? You go to Take Action, and you find all of the contacts. Look at this: Wall Street Journal, New York Times, Bloomberg, NPR, Business Insider, Reuters. These are the establishment media groups, which I've already identified as working with the farm unions, by the way, who are mentioned down here: Food Integrity Campaign, League of United. This is the same group of people that sued the state of Washington to get their agriculture shut down. So this is just a propaganda piece, and this is going to play into, Trump is a white nationalist, and he just wants to make these immigrant workers and their meat plants slave away. They're going to play all of these same cards. This is all one, after all, like we said, one integrated agenda here. It's all rolled up into one thing. We're going to shut this country down. And I think with that, ladies and gentlemen, there's not much else that we can cover. Or is there? I mean, people are afraid of the harvest labor not being there. There won't be any food if we don't have any harvest labor. And even more interesting, there are also signs from the establishment media that are blaming, that are indicating that it will be food that is the next, that is blamed, I should say, for the next part of the pandemic. So is it foodborne? In fact, in the FDA, USDA Memorandum of Understanding, there was a section about how while COVID-19 has not been a foodborne illness, we are preparing for that to change just in case. And then we've also started seeing a rash of media just in the last week and a half of different outlets with different audiences floating that idea that maybe it will be from meat next time. And, probably it's going to come out of these chicken factories. Look at this. Trump's meat industry. I told you, they're aligning Trump. They're equating Trump with the idea that we should have meat so that we can call it racist. And it's staggering what's going on. Trump's meat industry crisis might be a welcome warning of the fact that the entire industry needs to be shut down. And they go on to say that at the end of the day, it's going to either be we get rid of poultry, we get rid of factory farming, or we all die from a pandemic. So they're literally saying it's the meat or we all die. They're putting this on the line. And it's obvious, right? We saw the New York Times with their editorial about the end of meat is here. We see how hard they're pushing on this right now. New scientists right now saying we got to accelerate this cultured meat revolution. We know the billionaires have been funding that for a long time. We see across the world, it's a concerted effort. South Africa law changed so that you can put elephants and giraffes on your table. Right now, they're deliberating a radical review of their Meat Safety Act that wildlife advocates could pave the way for elephants, rhinos, giraffes, and every animal listed for human consumption. Quote, campaigners feel that law change could enable animals to be eaten. Some speculate it may be part of a broader plan to add more creatures to the menu and to launch a rare meat industry for international markets. It's no coincidence. At the same time, the EU is saying, yeah, we can go ahead and eat bugs. Go ahead and put that in there, just like the UN told us to. And that the FDA is saying, actually, you can change your ingredients on food now, and you don't even have to update the label. You don't even have to tell consumers what's in your food, as long as it's roughly the same. So yeah, that cricket protein instead of beef, it's fine. That's fine. Just don't even tell anybody at this point. Why would all these laws be changing across the world? Because they know, because we're now going into food shortages. And the press is pretty open about this. Middle East food shortages is highly likely, especially given the amazing locust infestations across East Africa and the Middle East. 40 million people are at risk. And the UN continues to put out these warnings about global, biblical famines and unimaginable devastation and suffering around the world. So they're advertising it quite vocally, what we're going into right now. And of course, as I've covered before, it was all part of the plan. This is by design. All the language they're rolling out now was used also in this simulation called the Food Chain Reaction Game with John Podesta behind it. And again, George Soros funding it. Like I said, it's the same forces at work behind the civil unrest and the food shortages. It's objectively true. It's verifiably true. By the way, the foodchainreaction.org website is gone now. Interestingly, it's been removed, but you can still, of course, access it via the Internet Archive, where you can see that they're talking about, looks like we're going to need global governance. That's of course the conclusion. We need to get Trump out of office and bring in the UN and just submit to the new green world order. All right, so that's as succinctly, and perhaps I failed there, but that is the crux of what's going on. Forces are at work to destabilize the United States radically right now, and even call for even a tighter and more martial law-like crackdown, keep people in place before these food shortages really hit home. And I hope that this has been an effective video to just show you that these people mean business, that they are imposing social distancing on harvest labor, that you can't do that without cutting your crops into a fraction of what the harvest should be. And that's what they're doing. It's all on paper. Please check out my work, iceagefarmer.com. And again, I'm now live streaming to dlive.tv/iceagefarmer, where I can talk about some things that I won't talk about on YouTube. So if you only subscribe on YouTube, you're missing out. Find me elsewhere. Thanks very much for watching. Again, thanks for sharing, because it is just absolutely critical that people understand what's going on right now and that there are food shortages ahead. That's their main angle for control, as they've talked about for a long time. Thanks for watching, folks. Let's go grow abundant food and let our neighbors know what's going on and build great things. Be well.